In the morning hours of July 10th, 1962, the 3 years old Lisa Shackelford was playing with her two younger sisters at their residence in Braceville, Illinois, United States. During the play, they got into an argument and Lisa became upset and walked away barefooted. At lunchtime, Lisa's mother called for her, but she didn't get a response. She and Lisa's 17-year-old sister started to trace Lisa's barefooted tracks through a cornfield and to a large oak tree, where they found Lisa's kitten. At this point, the mother lost the track due to rainstorm. She came back and asked for help from her other 7 children, and they all started searching, and an hour later, local law enforcement was called as well. During 2 days of searching, over 1,000 people combed the fields, bogs, swamps and roadways looking for Lisa. Canine dogs were at the scene as well, and one of them tracked her scent to a highway and stopped. Law enforcement believed Lisa crossed the highway and Canine lost her scent. Some law enforcement believed she was picked up by a vehicle and kidnapped. After 48 hours of Lisa's disappearance, she was found outside of the primary search area wandering the railroad tracks 5 miles north of her residence in Coal City. This area was described as very wild and with many coal tailings. She was in a satisfactory condition. Even though she was barefooted, there was no injury reported regarding her feet. How she traveled 5 miles into oblivion alone, and how no cars called the law enforcement when they saw her in the highway, are the questions we have no answers for. On the weekend of October 14th, 2006, the 8-year-old Samuel Bulk and his father were going to have some special father and son time. Samuel was diagnosed with mild form of autism, and this was a good time for them to bond since just a year before the parents got separated and Samuel didn't have the chance to spend much time with his father. The two drove from Portland to a rented cabin at Diamond Lake Resort, 10 miles north of Crater Lake and just northern border of National Park. The father and son spent some time watching TV in their cabin and then decided to take a trip to Crater Lake the next day. They reached the northern entrance of the lake and eventually made their way around the lake to the Crater Lake Lodge, where they had lunch and played some card games. Sammy had a grilled cheese sandwich and then drank some Sprite. They left the lodge and drove on the eastern side of the lake towards north. At around 4 p.m. they stopped in a parking lot on the west side of the road near Clitwood Cove. The two exited the car and Samuel ran across the road to look at a large rock formation. He had lots of energy and liked his dad to chase him around. He ran around the mound, over a small crest and disappeared over the small hill. The father followed as fast as he could. Once he was over the hill, he faced directly a large wooded area and couldn't see Samuel. He yelled for his son and walked around, but there was no sign of him. He started to panic and tried to call 911, but there was no reception. He ran to the roadway and stopped 2 cars to call for 911. In 30 minutes, the first ranger was at the scene, and after a couple hours, there were dozens of people in the area searching for Samuel. Later in the day, a storm hit the area and slowed the effort. The National Park System and search and rescue team searched for Sammy about 1 month. Samuel's parents were at the cabin near the search effort, monitoring the whole thing. The police investigated the father and he kept saying the same story. During the month, the search and rescue team reported they spent $540,000 to search for Sammy. There were 2 helicopters, 200 searchers, canine dogs, 14 agencies and the FBI at the scene. The only evidence they found was a footprint of a young person with a small stride found on October 20th of 2006, going downhill in an area of Grouse Hill. The area was searched extensively and nothing was found. It's worth mentioning that when one of the dogs sniffed Samuel's scent from the parking lot that he was lost from, it ran towards a rock close to a lake but never crossed the road where Samuel was lost from. The FBI reported there was no evidence of Samuel being a victim of crime, and to this day we don't know what happened to him. The Upshaw family ran a farm in north of Cartersville. This was a rural location with very few neighbors. At noon of November 8, 1940, Betty the mother looked out her back window and saw the 2-year-old Murray Jr. playing near the tractor in the backyard. There was a small barn and then thick forest started behind it. Betty looked at the backyard few minutes later, but she couldn't see his son. She also realized their 8-month-old puppy, which was playing with Murray, was also gone. She figured since it has only been few minutes, the 2-year-old couldn't gone too far. But when she couldn't find anything, she called the police and neighbors for assistance. Hours after Murray's disappearance, hundreds of searchers were at the scene, but they didn't find anything. Later in the day, a heavy rain started to pour down and it continued for 2 straight days. After the first 36 hours, Murray's father stated he believed his son was kidnapped. He didn't believe his son could have gone behind the search zone. 3 days into the search, volunteers were looking 2 miles from the farm in very rugged area where they found the 8-month puppy walking. They picked it up and brought it back to the farm. To everyone's surprise, including police, the dog was clean, dry and well fed. It was not hungry at all since it even refused food, even though it was gone for over 70 hours. Everything else in the area they found the dog was wet. On the 4th day of the search, Murray's body was found at the base of a pine tree on a rugged mountainside 1.5 miles from his home. There were few scratches on his body and his nose was bashed in. Searchers stated his dog was sleeping beside him at least for a while based on the evidence they found at the scene. An autopsy of the body stated there was no sign of violence. What happened to Murray remains a mystery to this day.